I think we can go ahead and get started. And I just want to first thank Chris Trowbridge from the Financial Aid Office for being willing to put this together. I've been lucky enough to sit in on a presentation that he has given about grad financial aid before, and it is an incredible amount of information, really useful and well presented. And so thank you so much, Chris, for being here.
No
and
problem.
I invite you to take it away.
Yeah, and hopefully, sometimes, well, first things first, let me stop sharing my video. It makes it easier for me to present when I'm not having to look at myself up in the corner. All right, so, and hopefully it's not too much information. I mean, with financial aid, there's always a lot to share, and sometimes parsing apart what's important to, a subset of students can be difficult to do. So hopefully this is helpful. So first of all, my name is Chris Trowbridge, and I am a financial aid advisor here at CSU Chico, and I've been working in financial aid for the last, 12 years or so. And I'm actually a Chico State graduate program alumnus, so I've been through what you guys have all been through, trying to figure out how you are going to pay for graduate school. So what I'm going to do today is go over some general financial aid information with you, and also some information that's a little bit more tailored to you all as graduate students. And really the main goal is to introduce you to some of the ways that graduate students can fund their education, and really encourage you to use the financial aid office as a resource. So if you guys have any general questions, you can either put them in the chat and I can try to answer them after the presentation's over. And also, like I mentioned, I'm happy to take questions at the end of the presentation if we have enough time. So one other thing is if you have, with financial aid especially, sometimes the questions are a little more specific to your particular situation. And if you do have a question that's like that, I would definitely encourage you to call our office and schedule an appointment with myself or another advisor. So we all have program areas up here in the financial aid office, and my program area is graduate programs, credential programs. And so I kind of have more of the specific knowledge, but if you meet with any of our advisors, they're all going to be able to help you. And if they don't know the answer, they'll just ask me anyway. So I will have contact information on a slide at the end that you guys can look at. So, it'll have our phone number and ways to contact our office. So let's see. So the first thing, and most of you probably already know this from your undergraduate years, but in order to be eligible for financial aid, you have to submit either a FAFSA or a California DREAM Act application. You're only going to submit one or the other, and most all students are going to be submitting a FAFSA. There are some students who aren't eligible to file a FAFSA and meet certain requirements under what's called AB 540, and they might be eligible to submit a California DREAM Act application, or CATA as we call it. Bottom line, if you have any questions about which one to submit, just give our office a call and we'll help you out. So when you submit a FAFSA, what it does is it allows our office to determine your aid eligibility and for the various types of federal and state financial aid that are available to graduate students. So you want to make sure that you file your FAFSA each and every year. It is something you have to do every year, and you want to make sure that you do it by March 2nd. If you don't, then you run the risk of not receiving certain types of state aid that you might otherwise be eligible for. And I'll go over kind of the standard types of aid here in a minute. And one to back up really quickly with the state aid, with state university grant, which is kind of the state aid that you're going to most likely qualify for as a graduate student. If you don't file by March 2nd, it is very likely that you won't end up getting it that year, although sometimes we extend that deadline out. So just really make sure that you put something on your calendar so you don't miss that deadline. So anyway, before we kind of go over the types of aid, I just wanted to make sure that you guys are answering the questions on the FAFSA correctly. So there's 4 grad level questions, as I call them, that are on the FAFSA that seem fairly self-explanatory, and they're listed right here. But a lot of times they do get answered incorrectly. And I think probably what happens most often, and the reason why they get answered incorrectly, is that if you've submitted a FAFSA as an undergraduate student and you're submitting a renewal FAFSA as a grad student, sometimes you don't go back and check these questions to make sure that you've updated them appropriately. But what happens is if you don't do that, it can cause any loan that you take out to hang. The disbursement won't be able to happen because the origination can occur. And so it's really important that you go back and you check these. Eventually, we would go back and correct them for you, but it's a lot quicker if you just go ahead and make sure that you submit it correctly to begin with. Okay, so going back to the FAFSA, when you fill out the FAFSA, all of the information that you enter in, including student income, tax information, asset information, number of family members in the household, number of family members in college, all of these pieces of data are run through a formula that's called the federal methodology, which ultimately outputs a number that we call the EFC. And EFC stands for estimated family contribution, but it's a bit of a misnomer. And they're actually doing away with EFC fairly soon. But if you have a zero EFC, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to have that you're going to have no payments out of pocket. And conversely, if you have an EFC of 46,000, it doesn't mean that you're going to need to pay $46,000 out of pocket. Instead, we use the EFC as an index to gauge eligibility for different types of aid or need-based aid. In the case of graduate students, it's going to usually be state university grant. So generally speaking, the lower your EFC is, the more likely you are to qualify for grant-based aid. And as an example, in order to qualify for state university grant, you have to have an EFC between 0 and 4,000. If it's 4,001, unfortunately, you wouldn't qualify for state university grant. Now, there can be some ways to help bring down your EFC, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, another thing to note is that if you filled out a FAFSA before, well, let me back up. Another thing to note is that if you're a graduate student, you're going to be considered independent. And if you've filled out a FAFSA before, you may have noticed that you, or depending on your age, that you were required to provide parent information on the FAFSA. As a graduate student, if you answer yes to being a graduate student on the FAFSA, you're not going to need to enter in parent information. And even if you do, the parent information isn't going to be used in the calculation that determines your EFC. So, so that's kind of a good thing for most people. It can be helpful in terms of aid eligibility. Another thing that you may notice when you get your financial aid award is that your initial aid offer is a little more limited, or to put a positive spin on it, it's a little more streamlined. And the reality is that graduate students do have less federal and state aid options than undergraduate students. As a graduate student, you aren't going to be eligible for Pell Grant that you may have received, Cal Grant, Middle Class Scholarship, EOP Grant, but it doesn't mean that there aren't options out there or more creative ways to help supplement funding your graduate degree. It just means that some of those ones that may have been there before aren't, directly present. So what types of aid can you qualify for? So a typical financial aid award, at least as it's first offered by our system, is going to consist either of a combination of state university grant, which is grant aid or free money, and unsubsidized loan, or you might just be offered an unsubsidized Stafford loan. Whether or not you're going to be offered state university grant is going to be dependent again on what your EFC is, if you filed your FAFSA by the March 2nd deadline, and some other variables that sometimes come into play. The state university grant amount for graduate students is $35.88 per semester. So if you are eligible for it, that's what you're going to receive. Now, that's assuming full-time enrollment. If you're enrolled half-time, or actually if you're enrolled in 6 units or less as a graduate student, you would actually get a half-time amount, but it corresponds with the state university fee amount you pay. So generally speaking, the state university grant covers just about all of tuition minus about $900 or so. Okay, so the other type of aid that I mentioned was unsubsidized Stafford loan. And as it indicates in the name, it is a loan, meaning that you're ultimately going to have to pay it back. Unsubsidized loans do accrue interest while you're in school, whereas the subsidized loan that you may have received as an undergraduate student had the interest portion subsidized until you actually entered into repayment. Unfortunately, for now, graduate students aren't eligible for subsidized Stafford loan. There is a bill that's going through Congress that hopefully gets passed that would allow grad students to start getting subsidized loan again. But right now, it is unsubsidized only. So the maximum amount of unsubsidized Stafford loan that a student can receive in a given academic school year as a graduate student is $20,500. Typically, though, students aren't offered the full $20,500 initially. And I believe that our system packages grad students at about $15,000 off the bat. So if you need additional loan, you would actually have to submit what's called the Stafford loan application, and that's available on the Financial Aid and Scholarship Office website under our forms and applications link. But if you have trouble finding it, you can always call our office for assistance and we can help point you in the right direction. There are also other aid opportunities that are associated with submitting your FAFSA. There are something called Grad Plus loans. And this again is a loan, and it has a little bit higher interest rate than the unsubsidized Stafford loan, and it actually requires a separate application. Typically, students are applying for a Grad Plus loan if, let's say, they're loan eligible only, and they've been offered the full $20,500, but they need more loan at that point. That's typically where the Grad Plus loan comes into play. We have information about it on our website again, but if you guys have questions, you're always welcome to ask. And then another type of aid that typically you're not going to see automatically as a grad student is something called work study. And basically, if you're not familiar with work study, a work study award provides students with the opportunity to earn money through a part-time job on campus. So basically, you'd have to apply and be hired in a work study position, and then the paycheck that you receive would essentially draw down on this award. So work study can be helpful as a graduate student sometimes, as departments can sometimes have work study funds that they can use to hire students to help grade paper or edit textbooks. There's also different pots of money that they can sometimes pull down from. But let's say that they've exhausted, all their ISA funds, they can sometimes use work study funds to help supplement it. So if you're interested in work study and you don't see it in your award, you can contact our office and we may be able to offer it to you. It does depend somewhat on what your EFC is. You have to have unmet need for us to be able to go ahead and give that to you, but we can certainly take a look. Another added bonus that's sort of new with work study is that if you have work study in your award, it typically, even a dollar of work study, it typically allows you to qualify for Calfresh, which can be really helpful to a student's budget. It means that you can potentially use that Calfresh money to buy food. So if you have questions about that, you can contact our office or the basic needs office, and they can have more information about how you might get set up with that. Let's see. There's also other aid options that I've listed here that don't require a FAFSA on file, including alternative or private loans. These are loans that we kind of call loans of last resort. They're private educational loans. Let's say that you didn't submit a FAFSA or you were in default on other loans or some other situation, you can apply for these alternative or private loans. And then finally, scholarships, which we will talk about in a little bit in more detail.
Chris, I just have a quick question. Tyler was wondering if what you were talking about earlier was for state schools only. So when you were talking about the state university grant and going on down the line there. Yeah.
So this is very specific to state schools and also very specific for Chico State for the most part. Now, if you're going somewhere else, there could be a whole host of other options that are out there. Some schools have there's just a variety of different options that might be present to you at a different university. So my suggestion would be to contact the financial aid office there and see what's available. Even at a UC school, there's going to be potentially different options that are out there and available.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see here. All right. So when you receive your financial aid award letter, one of the things that you may have noticed was that there was some information in there regarding what we call cost of attendance. And what's really important to know about the cost of attendance is that it's just an estimate of what it costs to attend CSU Chico. sometimes people see, a $25,000 cost of attendance and think that's what they're actually going to be required to pay. That isn't necessarily the case. So if you take a look at the budget items listed, there are only two that are really going to show up on your account as charges due that are charged by the university. The first is tuition, and that's going to be an actual amount that's listed on that cost of attendance. And the second would be if you happen to be in on-campus housing, and that amount that's listed is kind of going to be an estimate. It's a kind of a middle estimate of what you might pay if you're on-campus housing. We do see generally, though, that grad students are less likely to seek on-campus housing. So if you live off campus, your housing costs are going to be dependent on where you live and what your actual rent and bills are. All of the other budget items that are listed are estimates depending on where you buy your books or how you budget your personal expenses, may be more or less than what's listed there. One other big thing to note about the cost of attendance for graduate students is that it is the upper limit to which we can award financial aid. So if you have a cost of attendance of $25,232, that's going to be the most aid that we can offer you. When I talk about aid, that does include scholarships, that includes loan, that includes all of the different financial resources that we would have to put in there. And so there can be times when we have students who, let's say, are coming back to school and they have a family and their cost of attendance may be significantly higher. And we do have budget increases that I'll talk about a little bit here later, appeals that you can turn in that might allow us to increase your cost of attendance, which could result in additional aid eligibility for you. All right. Let's go over to scholarships. Okay. So one thing that for graduate students, because of the, your aid eligibility is somewhat more limited, when it comes to federal and state aid, is that it's going to be important that you really look into scholarships and that you look into scholarships early. And when it comes to scholarships, there's really three broad categories that we talk about here. There's Wildcat scholarships, which are scholarships that are filtered through CSU Chico and require that you submit the Wildcat scholarship application. There's departmental and program scholarships, which are also filtered through the university, but typically require a separate application. And then there are external scholarships, which, as the name kind of suggests, are scholarships that are sourced from outside the university. I'm really going to kind of focus here more on the Wildcat scholarships and a little bit on the external scholarships. There is a link here that I think if I click on it, it'll open up. Yep. That has some information on our webpage about department scholarships. And I can put this link here in the chat after we get done if you guys are interested, or if you want to screenshot this is fine as well. But one thing that I would recommend with the departmental scholarships is that you guys just check the web pages of whatever program that you're in and see if there's anything available, and then also talk with your professors to see if there's anything new that may have come up. So going back to Wildcat scholarships, the benefit of Wildcat scholarships is that there is one application that you submit that puts you into consideration for all of the scholarships that get filtered through the university / Wildcat scholarship process. The Wildcat scholarship application opens up January 2nd and closes February 15th every year. And this is prior to the start of the fall semester. So what that means is for this upcoming academic school year, the Wildcat scholarship application has long since been closed. And we're aware that this makes it difficult for students who are new and coming in to be aware of the deadline. And I know with a lot of you, it's possible that you weren't even admitted at this point in time. And we've tried different ways to kind of change this, but unfortunately, when you move one piece, it causes another issue somewhere else. And so unfortunately, this deadline kind of is what it is for the time being. So if you missed it this year, I would definitely encourage you to bookmark this or put this on your calendar so that you don't miss it for next year. So I'm just going to pull this page up really quickly. So this is the Wildcat scholarship page. So I'm not going to dwell on here for too long, but I want you guys to definitely come back and explore and take a look at it early. Don't don't start looking at this next year in January. You want to take a look and see all the things that we're asking for. Let's see. Again, I can go ahead and put this URL in the chat at the end if you guys would like me to do so. One thing that you'll notice is that the Wildcat scholarships are awarded based on a range of funding criteria. We often get asked, how can I qualify for one of these? But there really are a broad range of funding criteria for these scholarships that include educational and career objectives, scholastic achievements, financial need, involvement in school or community service, active affiliation with clubs and organizations, and special qualifications. And you can actually view the scholarship opportunities and search them by entering in keywords. I believe if you go here, you can enter in keywords and see what scholarship opportunities we have available that might be specific to you. It isn't absolutely necessary that you do this because really you're going to be entering information about yourself, and you're going to be submitting a few writing pieces. And then what we're doing is using data that we have available to us to kind of match students with the scholarships that they're best suited for. And then those get sent off to a committee, and the committee ultimately makes the decision. But it is sometimes nice to know what scholarships are out there. Okay.
Chris, can I also ask you another question?
Sure.
Elena was wondering whether she should wait to file her financial aid if she's waiting to get into the program.
So it depends. Well, no, I mean, I would go ahead and do it. I mean, obviously, if it's for next academic school year, the FAFSA isn't going to be available just yet, although it does open up in October. So you could certainly do that for next academic school year. But if you are planning on starting, say, in spring, I would just go ahead and get it done. What'll happen practically on our side is if you're not admitted currently, but you have CSU Chico listed as one of your schools on your FAFSA, it's going to come into us, but it's not going to get loaded into our system. But as soon as you have an active admission status, that'll change and it'll get loaded up. And then we would be able to go ahead and get you set up with aid at that point.
Okay, and it looks like she is applying to the MFT program for fall 2022, meaning that she would be applying in October through the end date there.
Yep.
So would know by spring.
Yeah. And there's really there's no downside to doing or to submitting your FAFSA early. I mean, bottom line, when you're submitting the FAFSA, they're going to require you to use tax information from 2 years prior, regardless. So you already have all that information available to you. So I would just go ahead and get it done. And that way, if there happens to be anything, so every time you fill out a FAFSA, you get what's called a student aid report. And sometimes that student aid report might have something on there that lets you know, hey, you did something odd on your FAFSA, you need to go back out and correct something. The earlier you do it, the more time it gives you to go back out there and make sure that you correct anything that might need to be corrected. So. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So moving on to external scholarships. So as far as external scholarships go, there are a whole host of different opportunities that are out there. And I know as a graduate student, for me, one of the difficult things was figuring out where to go, how to find these scholarship opportunities. And once you find them, having to go out there and actually submit separate applications. Again, one of the benefits of the Wildcat Scholarship is that you're submitting one application and it puts you into the running for all of these different scholarship opportunities. With external scholarships, that isn't necessarily the case. The reality is that it's something that's difficult for our scholarship office of one to stay on top of. All of the different opportunities are out there. So ultimately, it does take a little bit of legwork on the part of the student to figure out where these are. So one thing I did want to show you, well, let me back up. One thing I did want to show you here is that we do actually have a link to a few scholarship databases, search engines here. And what these allow you to do with mixed results, is to enter in information about yourself, what your program is, what your future career goals are. And then these search engines pull back potential scholarship opportunities for you. I've used these in the past as a student, and sometimes they work really well, other times not so much. So it is a little bit hit and miss, but it's certainly something to look into. Another thing that you can do is if you click on this Academic Works link here, you can actually click on up here, external scholarship opportunities, and it will pull up some of the external scholarship opportunities that we do keep kind of tabs on. And these aren't things that we necessarily recommend, but they're just, from folks who have let us know that they have scholarships for CSU Chico students. So it's certainly something to take a look at. So as far as tips go, for external scholarship opportunities, one of the things that you really need to do is start early. It's never too early to start, because a lot of these scholarships are going to have deadlines, and a lot of these deadlines are a lot earlier than you think. So you want to make sure that you give yourself enough time to write your statement and collect letters of recommendation. So the earlier you start, the better. Like, it's not even too early to start now for next academic school year if you're looking at external scholarships. Another thing is that you really have to be persistent. I had a friend of mine who I was talking to who was telling me a story about how she just peppered every place with applications, and she ended up getting a bunch of $200, $500 scholarships that added up to around, I think, 2,800 or so. So sometimes you might get small scholarship amounts, but those can add up at the end of the day, and really be helpful. It definitely can be frustrating sending in a lot of scholarships and not seeing the results, but it's usually going to be the students that are really persistent that reap the benefits from these external scholarships. Another thing that you can do is create an introduction letter template, and then some other templates that you can reuse for these scholarship applications as well. That's something that I did that was very helpful. Okay, so I'm going to change up here a little bit. Let me stop really quickly. Does anyone have any questions?
It looks like Elena was also wondering when in October. So I am not sure if you mean FAFSA. When is that available?
So the FAFSA, I believe it's October 15th when it opens up. But at any point in time after that, you can go ahead and submit the FAFSA for the next academic school year, for the 22-23 academic school year. As long as you do it before March 2nd, you are fine. And if any of you have missed that March 2nd deadline, certainly don't make that a reason not to complete the FAFSA. You still want to complete it. Just try to get it done by March 2nd if you can.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about exceptional circumstances appeals here, and this is kind of a big thing right now. So if you guys have filled out the FAFSA for this year, or when you go to fill it out, you're going to notice that it's asking you for tax information from 2 years previous. And for this current year, it asked for 2019 tax information, and here we are in the middle of 2021. So even in the best of times, there's a possibility that a student's financial circumstance may have changed significantly from 2 years ago. And right now, with everything that's going on with the pandemic, this is even more the case. It's also often the case that with graduate students, that some of you may have graduated with your undergraduate degree, gone into the workforce, and now you're either cutting back your hours or you're quitting your job to come back for additional education. So bottom line, if your income that's reported on the FAFSA using that tax information that you're required to use isn't really reflective of what your current financial situation is, we do have something that's called an exceptional circumstances appeal process. And what this does is allows you to submit information and documentation to our office so that we can recalculate your EFC base your aid eligibility off your current financial situation rather than what it was 2 years previously. And I have a link here. I don't know if that link works. Oops. You can take a look at this link, and that's our appeals page where you can take a look at the various appeals, and it explains to you how to go about submitting the appeal. So with these appeals, we not only have the ability to consider significant income loss, but we can also look at other circumstances like loss of home or property, which unfortunately with all the wildfires is a little more commonplace than it used to be. We can take into consideration high and non-reimbursed medical expenses that might impact your ability to pay for college. We can take a look at non-reimbursed childcare expenses. If you support an extended family member, like if you happen to be supporting a parent financially, we can take that into consideration. And then we also have something that's called a travel budget adjustment, which allows our office to potentially increase your cost of attendance for required school-related transportation costs that are above and beyond what's already included in the budget. And this in particular can be really useful if you happen to have a large stipend that's associated with your program and you want to increase your total aid package, because that stipend does get counted towards the cost of attendance. One thing to keep in mind with this appeal is it doesn't really reduce your EFC, but increases your cost of attendance, which again allows us to possibly offer you more aid, which in a lot of cases ends up being loan. Although there are certain programs that I can think of where students who are state university grant eligibility aren't actually getting the full amount of state university grant that they could get. But when they submit one of these appeals, this travel budget adjustment, it can sometimes allow us to give them additional free money. So we have had some appeal workshops, which is something that's new. We've had a little bit of limited success with them. They weren't as well attended as we had hoped. And so I know that we're going to continue to do these, especially if we find that there is sort of an outcry for them. But we will have a few more, I imagine, that are going to be coming up. But at the moment, we don't have any. If you do have questions about an appeal, though, you are always more than welcome to call our office and kind of sit down with us, let us know what your circumstance is, and we can point you in the right direction of what appeal to submit, what kind of documentation you might need to submit with it as well. And it's also sort of helpful, and what we would do in these appeal workshops is just sort of explain to you how the process works, because more often than not, we get these appeals and they don't have all of the information that we need. And that's obviously, I think, on our office not really explaining to students what it is that we're asking for. And so, with the appeal workshops, it gives us an opportunity to do that, but also we can do that, like I said, in an appointment if need be. So one other thing with appeals, you do need to know that they take time to process. And in a good year, they usually take between 8 to 12 weeks to complete. They open up, I think we opened them up this year in, I want to say May. And so with the ones that we received early, we were able to get some of those done before the school year begins. But with a lot of them, what it means is, we're into the school year before we can give you an answer as to whether or not it's going to make a difference. And really, we can't guarantee what the result's going to be or whether or not it's going to result in additional aid until we're done with it. So, bottom line, it's best to try to get these in as early as possible. And it's a good idea to have a contingency plan to sort of make do with the aid that you are currently offered in the case that the appeal doesn't result in additional aid eligibility. Okay, so let's see, next steps. Successfully navigating the financial aid process can definitely be a challenge at times, but there are a few things that you can do to help ensure that the process goes smoothly. So the first thing that I would do is recommend that you meet with an academic advisor to discuss your academic plan and plan your courses. And then once you've done this, schedule an appointment with a financial aid advisor and let us know what your plan is. Every student's situation is going to be unique, and the more information that we have about what you're planning on doing, the better the better we're going to be able to help you and make sure that you have all of the aid that you need to complete your program. And as an example, there are some programs that have standalone certificates that are associated with them. And if you plan on pursuing these certificates, you'll definitely want to understand how to go about planning your classes so that you can maintain financial aid eligibility, because a lot of times, if these certificate programs are offered as standalone programs, the certificate classes aren't necessarily fundable, because they're not technically a part of your master's program. So anyway, if you have a situation like that, definitely come in and meet with us. Also, if you're taking prerequisite coursework, you want to understand how this might affect your financial aid eligibility. And then if you're in a high units master's degree, you might you want to be aware of what's called our maximum units policy. The bottom line is that the more information that we have and that you're able to present to us in an appointment, the better that we're going to be able to help you plan and avoid any pitfalls as you kind of move through your academic career in your graduate program. Another thing that you're going to want to do is just check your Wildcat email regularly and check your student center for holds and to-do list items. These are the email and the student center are going to be the two main ways that our office is going to communicate with students. This is less the case with graduate students, but we oftentimes hear that no one told a student that they had a hold or what have you. And the reality is that all that information is out there. You just need to make sure that you're doing your due diligence and checking it. Another thing would be to review your financial aid award letter. And I believe nowadays we are sending a link to your Wildcat email with that. And then if you have questions about it, contact our office and we can go over it with you. And then accept or decline your aid offers in a timely manner. And one last thing that I just kind of wanted to say is it isn't always possible for every student to be able to fund their graduate education without taking on some loan debt. It's, if you can avoid it, obviously that is the ideal situation. But don't be discouraged if it's the case for you. I would just encourage you to explore career opportunities in your field of choice. And, assuming that the earning potential is there, you can view a loan as an investment in yourself and your future earning potential. Just make sure that the amount of debt that you take on is kind of commensurate with what it is that you hope to earn in your master's or earn with your master's, I should say. It is very easy with the amount of unsubsidized loan that you can borrow as a graduate student to take on quite a bit of loan over 2 or 3 years. So you just want to make sure that you're kind of aware of what it is that you are taking on and what your repayment options are. And we can always help you with that here in our office as well. And so finally, I just wanted to share this contact information. You guys are welcome to screenshot it, or I can put it in the chat later on. And let me go ahead and see if I can share my video again. Okay, so does anyone have any questions? I don't know if I can see the chat here. Let me stop. Are you guys ready for me to stop sharing the screen? Have you written down information? It's nodded. Thumbs up. Okay. Okay.
That's great, Chris. I do want to just really quickly kind of go through a little bit of information about what some of the fellowships and awards that are available through CSU Chico and also the Chancellor's office really quickly. And so if folks have questions, you're welcome to just chime in as you have them, but I will just go ahead and share my screen and just do a really quick run through of some of the things that that are also available. And let's see here.
Rose, let me throw one other thing out there. Is there are stipends that are part of a lot of programs that are here on campus. And so if you have a program that has a stipend associated with it, obviously that's going to be a financial resource for you as well. One thing to note with those is that we do have to enter those into your financial aid award. So a lot of times that can mean that you really may want to pursue one of these options to increase your cost of attendance if you need additional aid on top of those. Hopefully with some of the stipends that students are able to receive, you won't need to take out additional loan or anything. But if you do, definitely contact our office.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that kind of thing comes up a lot. So
right.
I appreciate that. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and share this screen. Can everybody see that? Here. Okay, great. So we're just going to go quickly over financial aid fellowship and award opportunities for grad school. And I want to mention that normally Dr. Matt Thomas, who is the coordinator of graduate fellowships, does this, and he just wasn't available today. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the things, and a lot of these are also sort of partially run out of our office at Graduate Studies. So we're in contact with Dr. Thomas all the time. So we have a variety of either campus generated or Chancellor's Office fellowships and awards. And the first of all, I want to talk about the Graduate Equity Fellowship Program, or GEFP. Grad Equity Fellows are graduate students apply, and you can apply before you are in the program. So you can apply the semester before. And this program is unique to Chico State in its design, even though all of the CSU campuses have some sort of grad equity fellowship, but each campus does it a little bit differently. And so in ours, your eligibility is going to sort of hinge on overcoming some kind of disadvantage. And there are lots of different kinds of disadvantages. And so you might have come from either a rural school or an urban school, each of which might have impacted your ability to learn. Maybe there were some, below par schools or something like that. You may have had a learning disability. You may have faced racial or ethnic discrimination that you've overcome. There are a variety of different disadvantages that students may have overcome, and that is what makes you eligible for this program. So, and this program allows 10 grad equity fellows per semester to be paid for 10 hours per week to work with a faculty mentor and either work on your research or their research. And you meet once a month if you're a grad equity fellow, and you talk about your experiences as a grad student. So lots of support from faculty and via this fellowship. So that is one fairly good pot of money that is possible for you to get, and it can be renewable up to 4 semesters. So that's the first option. If you are considering possibly going on for a PhD, CSU Chico offers master's degrees. We don't have PhDs, but if you are considering going on for a PhD, either after your master's or straight from your undergrad, you can apply for the Pre-Doctoral Scholarship Program. And this is one of the programs that come through the Office of the Chancellor. And so this is $3,000 to help you explore different campuses, maybe travel there, get reimbursed for your travel, possibly take the GRE and have that paid for, pay for applications, etc. And this is something that you would meet with Dr. Thomas, and he assists you in getting your essays together and make a plan, and then you get his assistance in applying. And you also, if you are a pre-doctoral scholar, then you have an opportunity to participate in a summer internship program at any Research One institution across the country, and get to do this internship during the summer, where you have a faculty mentor and they pay for your travel to get there. they pay for your room and board while you're there. And they pay you a stipend. So that's an excellent program. The other program is the Chancellor's Doctoral Incentive Program. And this is a program that allows you, if you are you have been accepted to a doctoral program, then you are eligible to take out up to $30,000 in loans. You don't have to take out the full 30,000. You could take out maybe 10,000 a year for the full 3 years, or you could just use it as a backup and not even take out any loans theoretically, but it does give you the opportunity to take out those loans through the Chancellor's office. And then if you come back and work at a CSU as a tenure track professor, you can have that loan forgiven at 5% a year, 20% a year, sorry, for 5 years. And therefore, within 5 years, the loan is completely forgiven and you don't have to pay anything. And so this is a way for you to pay for graduate school. And if you come back, pay nothing. So that's a really great opportunity to consider if you're wanting to go on to get a doctorate. And then there is another opportunity that is through the Office of Graduate Studies, and it's research and conference funding. So if you are working with a professor and they recommend that you present at a conference, at an academic conference, the Office of Graduate Studies can assist you with at least a little bit of funding to help you get there. And this program, the research and conference funds, also could provide assistance with monies to get to do some research at maybe an archive somewhere out of state or in Southern California, et cetera. So that's another possibility. And then also, Chris already mentioned that there are often departmental scholarships, and it's worth just at least checking with your department chair or your grad coordinator to see if they have any discretionary money available. That's a possibility. Also, teaching and research assistanceships. One of the things that I know Dr. Thomas has mentioned is that their department, which he's in the political science department, he says they have 7 or 8 teaching assistants each semester. And he says that they sometimes hire students that are not even in their department. If the folks are, have some expertise in that area, then, it isn't just a political science major or master's student. So if you've got, it's definitely worth checking it, depending on what you're studying with related disciplines in those departments, see what they've got going. And you can check, sometimes these things are listed on the campus announcements. So always check the campus announcements and student announcements. The Chico State Enterprises, CSE, has job opportunities listed, and often research assistants or grad assistants are advertised there, because often they're funded through that that adjunct office of Chico State Enterprises. You can also check the Career Center, because that is through Handshake, how they list often jobs that are open to graduate students in addition to undergrads.
Hey, Rose,
yeah.
can I jump in with one thing too? Because when I was a grad student, I actually took advantage of this as well. And one thing I would suggest is it's a great excuse to go in and talk with your professors and with your chair, and ask about what opportunities they have. The worst thing that they can do is tell you there's nothing available at the moment. but a lot of times you'll get your foot in the door for something that may pop up in the future, or you'll be the first one to know about something that's about to come up, and it's a good excuse to get to know the people in your field. So
Thanks, Chris. That's great advice. And then also just want to mention really quickly that there are a couple of other opportunities. There's the Adelante Post-Baccalaureate Pipeline Program, and that actually offers opportunities for graduate students to mentor undergrads. So the program assists undergrads as mentees, but they also have positions, paid positions, where there are mentors who work with those students. And then there's also an outreach part of that program, and there are grad students who are hired as outreach coordinators to do presentations around campus to promote grad education. And then they also have a summer research program that has stipends for faculty mentored research, and that's open to grad students as well as undergrads. And then finally, there are the student awards for research and creativity, and that is stipends for original faculty mentored projects. And there are applications for that opening up, I think, in the next few weeks. And so that is something that you should consider, because it, once again, is of money available for doing some research. And that happens 3 different times a year. So, and I, from what I understand, there is a smaller pool of people who apply to that than could receive it. So we would definitely recommend that you give that a thought. And that is what I wanted to add. And thank you, Chris, for adding the information into the chat. And I will just open it up for any questions anybody has before we close. And I also do want to mention that we will have graduate studies office hours, drop-in hours each day this week between 1 and 3. We have some Zoom hours, and so you are welcome to drop into those, and I will try to put that into the chat here as well.
One thing I was going to say as well is, because it just sort of made me think about it in the discussion of the stipends that are available, is that would actually be a good reason to come in and meet with someone in our office as well, if you happen to be a stipend recipient, because we do oftentimes have to account for that as part of your financial aid award as well. And so if you've already received all of your financial aid and then all of a sudden you receive a stipend, depending on how close you are to being awarded up to your cost of attendance, it could result in having to reduce some of the aid that you've received. And in most cases, it's going to be loan, and that's a good thing. So it's reducing your loan debt. But, depending on your financial aid award, it could be something else. And we would rather try to work with you to try to increase your cost of attendance so that you can get more money in your pocket that's free, rather than us having to pull money back. So, that is a very good example of when you're going to want to come in and kind of let us know of what's changed for you.
Excellent point. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so I have dropped in our drop-in hour Zoom link into the chat in case anybody wants to get in touch with us later. And then definitely make an appointment to go talk to Chris or somebody in the financial aid office. I want to thank you so much, Chris, for a lot of really incredibly good information. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem.